As I mentioned, Mr. President, I believe that our world is interconnected and interdependent, and certainly the most recent issues that have plagued our globe, including the pandemic, have made that point clear. Our world is interconnected and interdependent, and therefore what happens abroad is of priority to the United States of America. And that is why I am in Guatemala today. And that is why President Joe Biden will travel to Europe later this week. We are renewing our relationships around the globe and our presence around the world. In fact, just last week, I shared with the President that the United States will provide, as a first donation, 500,000 vaccines to Guatemala. Again, understanding the interdependence, the connection between us, and the importance of looking out for and prioritizing the needs of one's neighbor. I am proud to report that the agreements between President Giammattei and I have made today will strengthen the security and the prosperity for both the people of Guatemala and the people of the United States. And before we get to the questions, I just want to highlight several of those agreements. First, on the issue of security, is probably one of the highest priorities for each of our nations. The President and I agreed to continue our work to manage migration at Guatemala's northern and southern borders. We also discussed illicit drugs that are being smuggled and humans who are being trafficked across those borders, undermining the security of both the people of Guatemala and the people of the United States. Our nations have collaborated on these issues, and we will create a smuggling and human trafficking task force, which will work with local law enforcement to stop these crimes. And I have personally worked on these cases in my career and can say that when we see some of the most vulnerable in our communities being taken advantage of, being sold for profit, being abused, it should be a priority for all of us who care about the human condition and humanity. Second, on economic development, the President and I also discussed the root causes of migration, in particular, the lack of economic opportunity for many people here in Guatemala. The United States recognizes that it is both in our interest and reflective of our values to help create that opportunity and to share in economic prosperity. We will launch a Young Women's Empowerment Initiative to increase education and economic opportunities for girls and women. Understanding here in Guatemala, there is a rich tradition of girls and women being a part of the culture and the economy with extraordinary skills, and therefore the ability to thrive when seen as someone who can be the source of investment for the economic growth of the entire community. We will also invest in agribusiness and affordable housing and supporting entrepreneurs. President Giammattei has mentioned to me many times today and in previous conversations about his priority around what can happen in terms of the planting of trees and what that can mean in terms of ecology and in our environment. Well, recently, there's been a lot of talk about ecopreneurs, entrepreneurs who are focused on climate, who are focused on what might happen, which is to protect our environment, but also see the capacity for jobs and economic development as a connection with that pursuit. I will also continue to work with CEOs around the world to...
And Kamala Harris on her first international trip as vice president, speaking from Guatemala City today after a meeting with the Guatemalan president. VP Harris going on to say the U.S. will donate 500,000 vaccines to Guatemala. They'll also go on to create an economic empowerment for young girls. This is all in an attempt to stop people from making that dangerous trip to try to cross the U.S. border illegally. You're watching BNC Live. I'm Tishani Wedlow. Another hour of news that matters to you up next. All right, we bring you back to Guatemala City, where Vice President Kamala Harris is on her first international trip. She's taking questions right now from the press, so let's listen in.
Thank you both for taking questions. Madam Vice President, you just spoke about this. You've spoken about this in the past, the need to combat corruption to address the root causes of migration. But given President Giamatei's record on the issue, his criticism and objections to and resistance to anti-corruption reformers in the nation, has he given you any commitments that he will not try to interfere in anti-corruption efforts in the nation? And what makes you believe that you can trust him as a partner on that issue? And then President Giamatei, what do you say to critics who say that you are, in fact, part of the problem of corruption in your nation and that you don't take combating it seriously? And then one more, just because we're going to Mexico tomorrow. Madam Vice President, there have been questions about why you and President Biden have yet to visit the border, the U.S. southern border. And I'm wondering if you can answer some of those. Republicans have charged that you're not taking the situation there seriously. So how do you respond to that criticism, and when will that visit come?
The President of the United States recently issued a very clear statement about where we as the United States stand on this issue. It was unambiguous that we will look to root out corruption wherever it exists because we know it is not in the best interest of a democracy. The President speaks, the United States President Joe Biden speaks a lot about this, and actually President Giamatei and I spoke about that today. If we are truly to have and fight for democracies, especially in a world where increasingly they are under attack, one essential ingredient of our priorities must be to fight corruption. It erodes the confidence the people have in their government and its leaders. It compromises the ability of any country to maximize its natural resources to help and support its citizenry. On the issue of any corruption, on the issue of Guatemala, that has been one of our highest priorities in terms of the focus that we have placed here after the President asked me to take on this issue of focusing on this region of the world. And the work we are doing in furtherance then of that priority is the work of, again, creating an anti-corruption task force, bringing a renewed effort on behalf of the United States Department of Justice, the United States Treasury Department, the United States State Department, to work collaboratively to identify, to support investigations, and ultimately to support prosecutions and consequences for those who would endeavor to engage in corrupt behaviors. Furthermore, in bringing together the CEOs that we have been doing in the United States and convening them, they've made very clear that when it comes to the private sector, be it there or I might venture to say here or anywhere around the world, they want to know if they're going to put their hard-earned resources into any issue or initiative, that it will go to its intended beneficiary. And that means going to the people who need that support and not corrupt hands. There are many reasons why this is one of our highest priorities, which I think the people of Guatemala know well, and the people of the United States understand well. If we are to be effective, if we are to be true to our principles, we must root out corruption wherever it exists, and that is one of our highest priorities for that reason. On the issue of Republicans' political attacks or criticism or even concerns, the reason I am here in Guatemala as my first trip as Vice President of the United States is because this is one of our highest priorities, and I came here to be here on the ground to speak with the leader of this nation around what we can do in a way that is significant, is tangible, and has real results. And I will continue to be focused on that kind of work as opposed to grand gestures.